Okay, hey everybody. This is Dave Rockamore. I'm a solutions architect at AWS. Hopefully you can hear me pretty well. Everyone's giving me thumbs up in here, so sorry about that mix-up. Okay, so welcome to Getting Started with AWS. This is a great webinar if you're looking to looking to learn about how to get started with AWS. So if you have an account already and you're not sure what to do with it, or you maybe not really sure how to get started and where to sign up, this webinar should hopefully provide you a lot of the information you need to get going. So let's go over what we're going to cover today. So while some of you may have AWS accounts, some of you might not. So what I'll do is I'll show you some demos about how you can sign up for AWS and get an AWS account created. I'm also going to go over then about sort of what I consider to be the first steps that you should take with a new AWS account. So that'll be creating an identity and access management user and enabling multi-factor authentication so that you can access the account in a real secure fashion. Next, we'll do what people are usually excited about, which would be launching EC2 instances. So an EC2 instance is like a computer, a virtual machine running inside of AWS. And we'll go over launching a Linux instance and a Windows instance, so you can see how you can launch and connect to both of those. Next, I'll go over how to back up and restore EC2 instances. So if you're running something in there that you want to keep track of, we can show you how to back that up. And then we'll go over S3, the simple storage service, which you can use to store and serve files over the web. And finally, this is something that's important to a lot of people that are getting started with AWS. We'll go over how you can visualize your AWS costs and set billing alerts so you can get notified if your charges go high. So something I like to point out on this webinar, and we asked a question about this in the lobby and a couple people answered it, is about the AWS free tier. So for those of you unfamiliar with the free tier, this is a way that you can sort of get exposed to AWS and try and learn about and try some of the services at no cost. So the free tier includes most AWS services, and it's available for all new accounts. So if you've launched an account, you'll have access to the free tier. Many of the things on the free tier are good for 1 year from the day that the account was created. But there's other things that are sort of perpetually free. You'll get something free every month, and I'll show you some more details about that in a minute. So I want to point out that everything I'm doing in this webinar can be done within the free tier. So if you want to try along, probably when you're watching the recording later, you can do everything you did here under the free tier, no problem. And if you want more details on the free tier, go to aws.amazon.com/free. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is go through signing up for an AWS account. So if you haven't done this already, you can do this at aws.amazon.com. And you'll need a credit card, and there'll be some telephone verification. So you'll get a phone call, back to you to ask you to validate your identity. So let's switch over to the slides, and we'll do a quick demo of what that might look like. Okay, so here I am, at aws.amazon.com, and actually I'm at the free tier website because I think this is a good resource if you haven't looked at this already. You can just scroll down here and you can get an understanding about what's available, in the free tier to you. So for example, EC2 includes 750 hours a month of Linux and 750 hours a month of Windows usage. There's also some amount of storage for S3 and our RDS, our relational database service, so on and so forth. There's lots of details here, about what's available that you can do in your AWS account for free. And this is updated, kind of frequently as we update and release new services. So it's definitely worth checking this out, periodically to understand what you can try out without incurring any costs. Okay, so at any of the aws.amazon.com pages, what you can do is you can sign up, say create an AWS account. You click on this button right here, and that brings you into this form. So what you'll need to do is put your email address in, and you can click through this. You'll set a password. It'll ask you for your telephone number, and there'll be a telephone verification. So what happens then is you'll get an automated phone call, and it'll say, put in these numbers on the site. And once you do that, your account will be activated, and you'll receive an email that will allow you to log in. And then the account that you get, the password that you're setting is what we call the root account. So it's like the super account or the super login for the entire AWS account that lets you do anything, which is pretty useful, but also can create some. But it's also really important to secure it and protect it. So let's talk about how we can do that next. So let's switch over back to the slides and talk about sort of what some of the first steps are. Once you have that account. Okay. So once you've created your AWS account and you've gotten your login information, if you logged into the AWS account, you'll be dropped into the console. Now, like I was saying, that user that has your email address associated with it will be the most powerful user in your AWS account. You can do anything in there, including create users or launch instances or access stuff, access anything in the account. So, what I like to do is to make sure that my accounts are secure is I create an identity and access management user. So IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. It's a system that allows you to create users and groups and roles that have real fine-grained access to different resources in the account. So you can use IAM to do something like, have a user that allows read-only access to something that's going on in EC2, but can, write things into S3 buckets or any sort of combination of that. It's pretty useful if you want to secure your account. So that's what I would do. So that's what we're going to talk about doing first. Another thing that's really important to do for IAM users and for that root account is to enable multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication is a system that will associate with your account, which is it's just another factor in addition to the password. So to log into an AWS account with IAM or with a root account, if you enable MFA, you'll be required to put your username, your password, and the code from a token. Now this can be a physical token, or this can be a soft token like something on your phone. This provides an extra level of security on your account, so that even if someone gets access to your password or something like that, they'll still need this second factor to log in. That becomes really important with AWS accounts because you can launch things that cost real money, like EC2 instances. So my recommendation would be to enable this for IAM users and for the root account. And we'll go over how to do that in a demo, which we're going to go to right now. Okay. So let's see. Now we should be seeing my screen again. So once you've logged into your AWS account, what you'll get into is this AWS is the console. So the console is sort of your entry point to all of the AWS services that are available, and you can see that they're sort of listed, down here. And there's a lot of services to pick and choose from. The one that we're going to be focusing on first is this one called Identity and Access Management. It'll be under Security and Identity. So let's go there. So inside of IAM, you can see on the left side that we have some options like groups, users, roles, policies, identity providers, so on and so forth. What we want to do is create a user that will allow us to access the AWS account without having to use the root AWS account. So we'll click on users. There's already a user in here, but let's make a new one just so that we have so we can demo that. So I can create a user and I can give it a name. I'll call it Dave Demo. When you create a user, you have an option to create an access key. This is an access key and a secret key. It's like an API token to access the AWS APIs. If you're developing something or you're using some third-party software that needs to access an AWS account, you might need an access key. If you don't, if you're just going to log into the console, you don't necessarily need an access key. You can always create one later. So let's just uncheck that to not create one. Now that was really quick, right? So we've created an IAM user in here. But without a password on it, without an access key, and without any policies that allow it to do anything, it's kind of useless. So let's take a look at it and see what we can do with it. Okay, let's see if we can make this a little bit bigger for everybody. All right, hope that's a little bit better. Okay, so we have this user here, this Dave Demo user, and let's take a look at this user. So the first thing you would want to do is give this user some permissions to do some things inside of the AWS account. So we'll go over to permissions. And what we can do is associate a policy with this user to give it access to do something in the account. So let's attach a policy here. Now there's a lot of sort of managed policies that are built by AWS that allow you to access different things. And you can scroll through here and you can see different policies that give you access to different kinds of services. A good policy for the IAM user that you're creating to do things in your account is probably either going to be administrator access or power user access. The difference between those two is that administrator access lets you do anything in the account. It's the same as having access to the root account. Where power user allows you to do anything except for create and delete users. So it's up to you. Typically for me, to be honest, most of the time I really just need power user. So we can just search for that. And we can attach this policy. Okay, so now this account has this power user access policy. And just to give you a taste of the policy language that you can use to really, define fine-grained access, because you can also write these policies yourself if you'd like. Let's look at this policy. So this is saying that, the users with this policy can do anything in the account except for access, identity, and access management services. These can be, complicated. If you're just getting started, I would stick with some of these canned policies that get close to what you want to do. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is set up a password to be able to log into this account. So under security credentials, this is where we can do things like create passwords or access keys. So for the Dave demo account, what we can do is we can say manage password. And through here, we can assign an automatically generated password or assign a custom password and have that set up so that when I log into the console with this user, I can use that password. So finally, once we have a user in there with a password, what we need to do is set up multi-factor authentication. So this is really good to protect the account in case you lose this password or someone gets access to that or something like that. For this, you can click this button to say Manage MFA Device. And if you're using, this is where you decide whether you're using a virtual MFA device like your phone or a hardware MFA device like a token. You can order those from Amazon. If you click through this, what will happen is it'll show you if you've enrolled in multi-factor authentication for another website, it's the same thing. You can scan this code and enter it, and then on your phone there'll be an app that can do this. Google Authenticator is the app that I use, but there's several others that you could use to do this. We're not going to set that up for now, but that's how you do that. And this is something that you want to do for all of the IAM users that you're creating, and for the root account, just to make sure that your credentials are protected. So finally, when you have that information, you're going to need to log into the AWS account, with that password and with that user that you created. And to do that, you need to go to a special link, and it's a link that's going to be different for everybody's AWS account. It looks like this. It's in the dashboard of the IAM console. It has the account number and then this long link that allows you to sign in. So if you're creating those users for yourself or for other people that you work with, you'll need to give them this link to be able to log in. Okay, cool. So now that we've created that account, let's go switch back to the slides and we'll talk about sort of the next steps, which will be creating EC2 instances. Okay, great. So the first kind of step to being able to access an EC2, there's a couple things we have to do to sort of lay the groundwork to be able to launch and connect to an EC2 instance. So the first thing that we need to do is create a key pair. So this is an SSH key pair. So SSH stands for Secure Shell. It might be familiar to some of those who've used Linux before. If you haven't used Windows, this is and aren't familiar with SSH, this is a public-private key pair. They used to access EC2 instances, and you need these both for Windows and Linux instances. And I'll show you the details about the Windows instance. SSH keys help avoid password weaknesses. They're pretty strong things. They're longer than passwords, for example. And you can import your own key into EC2, or you can have AWS generate one for you. So if you have a key that you like that you use in a lot of places, you can do that. You can import it, or you can just have AWS generate one for you. Something important to remember is you will need to maintain control of the private part of the key to access anything launched with that key pair. And AWS does not store the private part of that key. So if you created a key pair with us, we'll give you the option to download it. You need to hold on to that and keep it safe because there's no way that we can get it to you. And without that key pair, you won't be able to access your AWS account. All right, let's switch back over to a demo or to my screen, and I'll just show you sort of how to do that. Okay, so to do that, we're going to go to a different service. So let's go back to the list of services here, and we'll go to EC2. And I'll make the text bigger here so that everybody can see. Okay. So this is EC2. EC2 stands for the Elastic Compute Cloud. It's a place where you can launch virtual machines on AWS. This would be great for running things like web servers or database servers or the applications that you're looking to operate on AWS. So to create, there's a lot of different options in here, but on this left pane, what we can do is go down to key pairs, because this is what we're going to need to create. So there's already a couple key pairs floating around in here, but we can build another one right now. I'm just going to click Create Key Pair up here, and it gives me the option to name the key pair. Well, let's make one called Demo. And we'll click Create. So what that will do is create this key pair in here, and this is the fingerprint for the public part of the key, and it downloaded the private part of the key to my computer. So I'll need to put this in a safe place and not share it with anybody else to make sure that I and only I have access to the instances I launch with it. Something else that's important to point out here too is that for services like EC2, everything happens within a region. Okay, so a region is a collection of AWS resources in a location. So things like key pairs or EC2 instances or EBS volumes or all kinds of things like that are located in a specific place. And something that I think is sometimes kind of confusing when you're getting started with AWS is you'll create something, you'll think you have it all set up, and then it'll log back in the next day and you won't be able to find it again. Chances are maybe you've moved into a different region. So what I like to do is always keep an eye up here in the upper right part of the console to see which region I'm in. So I work in Seattle, so Oregon is a pretty close region to me, so I always use that. But it's always a good idea, as you're creating stuff, to take a look up there and make sure that you're in the right region or in the same region that you want to be. Okay, cool. Now that we have that key pair, we're going to need that to get access to an instance. So let's go to the next slide here, or let's go back to the slides, and we can talk about sort of the next step of things that we need to do. So the next thing that I like to do when creating an EC2 instance is to create a security group. So a security group is like a firewall for your instance. It sits around the instance to protect it from network traffic accessing it. By default, they block all traffic. So if you just set up a default security group with nothing else in there, nothing will be able to access it. You get to choose which ports and protocols are open. So if you wanted to open it up for SSH, you could open up port 22, or if you wanted to run a web server, you can open up port 80. You can also specify port ranges. You also get the ability to choose who the ports are open to. So you can use CIDR notation to allow the different networks in. So if you want to allow the outside network for your internet connection for your firewall, you could do that. Or if you wanted to allow just a single IP address in, you can do that too. And you can use create rules that specify security groups. So if you wanted to create a security group for database servers and only allow web servers to access it, you could also set that up too. All right, so let's go over just creating a basic security group that will allow us to access EC2 instances that we launch. So we'll switch back over to the demo. Okay, so we're here in the console. We're still in EC2. We can click up to security groups. And then there's already a couple of security groups in here right now, but let's make a new one just to show what that might be like. So in here we can give the security group a name. And we'll give it a little description about what it might be for. And then we can add some rules. So let's just go over adding sort of a simple rule to allow, let's say, SSH access. Or let's do SSH and RDP. So I've just clicked Added Rule, and I get this drop down here that allows me to sort of specify, what ports are open and which ports are to who. But we can put in whatever we want here, or we can pull from some pre-built defaults here. So we'll do SSH, and that'll automatically populate port TCP22. And then we can say the source. So this is where we're allowing the traffic from. There's a couple of options here. We could type in a CIDR block that we know of, that we know is good. We could say anywhere, which would be anywhere in the world or any place on the internet. Or we could say my IP. The more specific you are here, the better, because you're sort of locking this down to sort of control who can access things. So my IP is usually a pretty good bet. The 000/0, which is everything in the world, is appropriate sometimes, but you want to be careful there because you don't want to sort of open that inappropriately. Just a note about this, when you select my IP, the console is doing its best effort to check your IP address, but that might not be right depending on how you access the internet. So there might be something to double check to make sure that we have the right IP address there. You can always change these rules later to sort of refine them, but there's nothing more frustrating than trying to figure out what's going on here. So when in doubt, take a look at what's going on with your network and your internet connection to make sure you have the right addresses specified there. So let's add another rule here too, to allow Windows access. So we can scroll down through here and pick RDP, which is the remote desktop protocol, which is how we'll access a Windows instance. So that's TCP 3389 rather, and we'll say my IP again. Okay, so now we have some rules here. We can say create. Okay, cool. Okay, so now we've got a key pair and a security group. Let's switch back to the slides and sort of talk about the next steps when it comes to launching an EC2 instance. Okay, So EC2 is the Elastic Compute Cloud, and inside of EC2, you can launch instances. So instances are virtual machines that run in the cloud. You have full control over what's running on that instance, and you can install any software you choose. So that could be software you're developing, or third-party software that you're buying and installing, or any sort of combination of that. You get to choose the instance type and the instance size, which will give you different features of the computer. So you get different amounts of memory, different CPUs, or different amounts of CPU power. Some instance types come with attached storage that's really fast. Some come with special purpose functionality like GPUs for doing things like deep learning or graphics workloads. There's all kinds of different options there. You also, when you launch an instance, you'll also specify the key pair and the security group to launch the instance into. So that's why I created those things first, because you sort of need those to get an instance up and running. Just to really emphasize this, when it comes to running stuff on EC2, customers have full control of what runs inside of that EC2 instance. So any software you install on there, any configuration changes you make, that's all yours and up to you. So you have full control to do sort of whatever you need to do. All right, let's go back to the demo and launch that EC2 instance. Okay, so we're still over here in the console, and we're in the EC2, and we're in EC2. And let's just go over to instances. Now there's a couple of, this is just a notification. Periodically there'll be notifications to this console about things that are happening inside of AWS. So we close that out. And what we'll do is we can click on Launch Instance. There's already 2 instances running in this account, and I'll sort of show you about what those are in a minute. It's also really important here. This is the part where you want to know which region you're in too. So we'll just double check. Yeah, we're still in Oregon. Okay. So we'll click Launch Instance. So the first thing you do when you launch an instance is you select what's called the AMI, or the Amazon Machine Image. So this is the base image that the instance is launched from. And you have a lot of different options here. On this page, in this wizard, there's a collection of sort of standard choices or popular choices. There's Amazon Linux, which is a distribution of Linux that's built and maintained by Amazon. There's also SUSE, Red Hat, Ubuntu, and then there's many options for Windows. So if you're launching a Windows, there's the capability to launch those in here, which is pretty neat. So those are default AMIs or publicly available AMIs that were very popular for customers. You can also create your own AMIs and create your own images, and we'll go through that a little bit later. If you have built the perfect web server or the perfect server for you, you can make an image of it and then be able to launch it quickly later. And we have the marketplace. So the marketplace is a place where you can buy third-party software that's packaged as AMIs and launch them into your account. So if there's a database that you want to launch, or maybe a network device like a firewall, you can use that there. And then finally, there's community AMIs. So these are AMIs that are free to use, that someone else has created and made public. Gives you a lot of options for how to access software inside of AWS. So for this demo, let's just launch the Amazon Linux AMI just to show you what launching an instance is like. So the next page we get brought to here is the instance type. So this is what the instance type and size is what determines the features that the instance has. And it also determines the hourly price of the instance. So let's scroll down here and take a look at some of the instance types. There's instances in the T2 family, which are variable performance. They're low cost. They're really great for sort of practice or demos or something like that. I'll note that the one that's eligible for the free tier is the T2 Micro, and that's highlighted in green here. So if you want to stay within the free tier, you should be operating a T2 Micro. There's instance types for all kinds of workloads and sort of capabilities. And this little filter will drop down and say if you want a compute optimized instance type or memory optimized instance type, you can get some information about what might be the most appropriate instance to help you choose right there. Okay, so let's just use T2 Micro because we want to stay within the free tier for this. All right, so next we can configure the instance details. So this is a lot of information on this page, which would help you specify, what your instances, your specific details about how your instance is working. The defaults are pretty much okay if you're just getting started. But just ones that you might need to know about in the future. I think the most important one on this page, if you're just getting started, is this auto assign public IP option. So sometimes you can launch an EC2 instance and it won't have a publicly addressable or internet addressable IP address, which may be appropriate in certain situations, like if you're building a network that's firewalled off from the world and it's connected to you over Direct Connect or VPN or something like that. But if you're just getting started, you probably want a public IP so you can access it over the internet from your desk or a coffee shop or wherever you are. So I would say make sure this is set to enable or use subnet setting enabled. That'll be the default in your accounts. That'll make sure that when this thing launches, it gets a public IP that we can access over the internet. Okay. Next, we can click through, we can add storage. And later on in this presentation, I'll go through some storage options. But this is where you could specify the amount of disk and the kind of disk that you have attached to the instance. The defaults here are fine. This is going to create an 8 GB disk for the instance. Okay, next we can tag instances. And tagging allows us to do things like create names for instances to make it really easy for people using the console. But it also plugs into tools that do billing aggregation or automated tools. I see a lot of customers building tools that will use tags to classify instances. So you could say, show me all the instances that the accounting department is using, or show me all the instances that were launched by Dave and Ian, something like that. So for now, let's just create a tag just for a name. We'll call this my demo instance. This will help us find it in the console later. All right, next we get to configure the security group. So this is where we can create, if we forgot to set up a security group ahead of time, you can do this here, through the launch wizard, or we can just, select an existing security group that we already created. So in here we can see this demo group. This is the one that we created earlier. So I'll just select that one and we'll go forward here. Okay, finally we've made it to the end of this 7-step wizard. And we can get sort of a rundown. This is a summary of all of the options that we picked. We can go through this to make sure that we chose everything that that was important to us. We have it set up right. And if it all looks good, we can say launch. So now this is where we get to choose the key pair that we've associated with the instance. So, once again, so you can select the key pair here, and we can see there's 3 different key pairs in the account. We'll just do demo because that's the one I created before. But if we forgot to create a key pair, or we don't have access to the private parts of those keys, what we can do is we can use this to create a new key pair. So if you forgot and you got to the end of this wizard, you can do that. You do have to check this box to launch, which is basically you just saying that, yes, I have the private part of this key, because without it, I'm not going to be able to access the instance. All right, so let's click launch, and we'll launch that instance. All right, so the instance is in the process of launching. So let's go back to the instances page just to get a feel for what's going on. So you can see now there's 3 instances in the account. 2 of them are green that are running. Those are the ones I launched yesterday to make sure we'll be ready for this webinar. And then you have the one that we just launched, which is pending. So you can expect an instance to take probably just a couple minutes to launch. Sort of depends on what's going on with the AMI. But they launched pretty quick, but maybe a little bit too long for a webinar demo. So let's look at the ones we made yesterday. So I've tagged these Linux demo instance and Windows demo instance, and what I'm going to do is show you how we can access both of them. So if we click the details for the Linux demo instance, we get a bunch of information about what it is and where it's running, things like that. It has information about what security groups it's in, what AMI it is, things like that. The other thing that it has in here that's pretty important is this public DNS address. There's a public DNS and a public IP. This is what we're going to use to access this instance. Sorry if that keeps popping up, that tooltip. This is what we can use to access that instance. And so we'll just copy this to the clipboard because we're going to use SSH to connect here. So let's cut over to a terminal. And now we'll make this really big. My coworkers sometimes make fun of me because I actually typically run with a much bigger screen because I'm blind. All right. So if you're on a Mac, it's really easy to connect to if you're on a Mac or a Linux computer, it's really easy because SSH is probably built into your operating system. If you're on Windows, it's a little more complicated. What you'll need to do is download it'll have that private key, and you'll need to use PuttyGen to, there's several options. You can look into the EC2 user's guide to see how to do this. One way I know how to do this is to use PuttyGen to convert that PEM file that you get from us from downloading the key pair, which is the private key, into a format that PuTTY can understand. And then you can use PuTTY to access the instance over SSH. So once you've typed that information in there, so we're going to connect to the user EC2 user at the name of that instance. Press enter, and then we're logged into the instance. So this is a full-on Linux instance. We can do anything we can do on a Linux computer, right here. So this is where we'll be installing software, configuring things, running applications, simulations, whatever you would want to do. So that's how we access that. The Linux instance. Let's go back over to the console real quick to talk about Windows instances. So you can't SSH into a Windows instance, at least not easily, as far as I know. So to get access to that, what we're going to need to use is RDP, the Remote Desktop Protocol. But to do that, we need to get a password. So there's no password baked into the default, Windows AMIs that you're launching. So what you need to do is use the SSH key pair that you launched the instance with to be able to decode a password for the Windows instance. So we can do that right now. So we select this Windows instance, and we get the same kind of information. We have the public DNS name, information about the instance type, et cetera, et cetera. In order to get the password, what we need to do is click this Actions menu here and select Get Windows Password. This will be available to you if you launch the Windows instance a couple minutes after the instance starts up. When this loads, what it's asking for is the private key for that you launch for the key pair that you launched the instance with. And if I choose this on my computer, which hopefully is in a place where I remember I put it, yep, it's right here. I can click Decrypt Password, and this will show me this incredibly easy to understand and memorize password right here. So you might want to copy that. You'll need this to connect to the instance. Okay, so let's say that so now that we've decrypted the password, we know the username is administrator, and we have the IP address. Let's cut over to the remote desktop program. Now I've already plugged that information in here into this RDP profile. So when I click connect here, this should log me in to the Windows instance that I launched. Okay, great. So just like on Linux, we're logged in here, and we can do anything that we could normally do on a Windows computer. Install software, configure things, run simulations, whatever it may be. You can get that set up, just as you would deal with any other, Windows computer that you're working with. Okay, so to be honest, I'm a little more familiar with Linux than I am with Windows. So to prepare for the next step here, let's do some actual customization to this to the Linux instance that we're working with here. So let's do something like let's install a web server. Okay, so let's say we've done a bunch of work here, and we've installed and configured this computer to be the perfect web server for us. Because the next thing that we want to do is talk about backing up and making a copy of this image so that we can use it again and again. Let's go back to the slides real quick and talk about some of the storage options, because that's really relevant here. Okay, so I sort of glossed over this when we were going through the wizard. But there's a part of EC2 called EBS, the Elastic Block Store. So EBS is persistent block storage for EC2 instances. So that's things like disks. If you're more familiar with traditional IT, you can think of EBS like a SAN. You use it to provision block storage to attach to an instance. You can create EBS volumes that are as small as a gigabyte and as large as 16 terabytes. So that's pretty big. The volumes are available in several different types that affect the performance, which changes what. So if you have a use case that needs a specific kind of storage, you can pick an EBS volume that matches that. And with EBS, you can create snapshots that are stored in S3 to sort of create backups of those volumes. When you attach those volumes to an instance, you can do things like format it with a file system to install software on there or install a database right onto it, whatever you need to do. So when creating EBS volumes, there's several different types that you can use. There's 4, let's say, right here. General purpose SSD, which is great for almost every workload. It's a good mix between cost and performance. Provision IOPS, which is another SSD, so solid state disk, option that gives you, higher performance and higher I/O per second, which is really good for things like databases or something where you really need, consistent performance. We also have two types of hard disk drives. These are spinning disk drives. One that's optimized for throughput, which would be things like streaming data off of them for data warehousing or media processing or something like that. And then cold, what we call cold HDD. So this is great for things like a big archive of very infrequently accessed files or objects that you need, but that you need pretty reasonable access to. So if you're looking at this and you're saying like, well, geez, Dave, I don't know which one of these I should choose. I'm not really sure what my workload needs right now, et cetera, et cetera. Here's my advice: just pick GP2. That's the default. Typically, this is good for most use cases, and I advise customers and partners to start here. If it seems like the GP2 is not working out for you and you need to switch to one of these others, you can just create a snapshot of AWS volume, and then reinstantiate it as one of the different as one of the other types of volume if you need a different performance characteristic out of it. So you're not really making a commitment. Let's start with GP2. It's the best choice for most workloads. Okay, so let's go back over to the demo where we talk about creating EBS volumes and attaching them to an instance. Okay, so I'll switch back over to my console here. So let's look at this Linux demo instance. So what we want to do is create a volume and attach it to the instance. So this would be like, let's make we're going to create a volume so that we can store files or media or whatever it might be, on the instance. So one of the things that I want to do here is understand which availability zone this instance is in. So inside of a region, there are multiple availability zones, which you can think of like a data center, a collection of data centers that are next to each other. Instances and volumes exist within one availability zone within the region. So when we create a volume, we want to attach it to an instance, we need to make sure it's in the same availability zone, or AZ. You'll hear that term a lot if you're looking at Amazon stuff. Okay, so this instance is in an availability zone called US West 2A. So we'll just make a mental note of that. So let's go down to the Elastic Block Store section, which is in the left side of the EC2 console, and click on Volumes. And there's already a couple volumes that are in here. So these are the EBS volumes that are attached to those instances. This is where the operating systems are for those instances. So let's create a new volume, and we'll make like a 20 gigabyte GP2 volume, and we can put it in US West 2A, let's say. So when we create a volume, we get some options here too. We can, if we have a snapshot, so a backup of another volume, we can use that to create this volume with that backup sort of restored onto it, which is really useful if you're making a regular backup of an EBS volume with snapshots, or you have a bunch of data that you're going to need over and over again. You can make a snapshot of it and then just instantiate volumes from it and attach it to the instance. So let's just pick a 20 gigabyte volume, and if we don't pick a snapshot, it'll make a blank volume for us. And we'll say create. And I think if we scroll over here, you can see that happened pretty, well, it's not there yet. Let's click refresh up here, and we can see that, yes, that happened pretty quick. The volume is created and it's available, but it's not attached to anything right now. So if we're going to use this, we're going to need to attach it to an EC2 instance. So we can select it, say attach volume, and then this gives us a list of all the instances that are running in that availability zone. So we'll just connect it to the Linux demo instance. And here we can choose where the disk is attached to. So you can attach many EBS volumes to a single instance if you need a lot of storage, but let's just click and attach it right there. Okay, cool. So that's in the process of attaching. Usually this doesn't take more than a minute or so. So it's done already. So that's attached. So I could go back to that instance, mount this volume, install file system on this, mount this volume, things like that. Okay, let's say that we did that and we've customized this and got it into good shape, and we've got some data on there that we really care about. It's the results of a simulation or something like that. So we'll need to make a snapshot of that to make a backup. So we can just go through the console here, click on Actions, click on Create Snapshot, and this gives us an option to set a name and a description so that we know what's on this snapshot in the future, and we can just say Create. Okay, so once that's going, it'll start making a snapshot. A snapshot is a point in time thing, but it takes a little bit of time for it to become available to be restored. Actually, it's already done. It depends on how much data is on that volume, how much data you changed on that volume since the last time you created a snapshot. So, but that's available. So we have these snapshots in the snapshots section of the Elastic Block Store, part of the console. We can see these snapshots. In the future, we could restore a volume from this snapshot if we wanted to. So snapshots are really good for data volumes that are associated with an instance, like a backup of a database or something like that, or a backup of a media archive. But if we wanted to create a copy of the entire instance so that we could launch it again, our perfect web server or whatever it is, we'll need to make an AMI, an image. So to do that, let's switch over back to instances up here. And we'll pick the instance that we want to make a copy of. So let's do the Linux demo instance. So this is an instance that I've configured and customized and set it up just right, and I'm positive that if I launch new instances, I want them to be launched just like this. To do that, what you can do is you select the instance over here, and you click Actions, and then you can you go down to Image, and then say Create Image. Now this opens up a little wizard, or a big wizard, as it looks like in my screen here. I'm sorry, everybody, I want to shrink this down a little. Okay. So here we get some options about creating the image. So we can give it some names, change its configuration as far as the storage that's associated with it, things like that. Once we have this set the way we think we want it to, we're going to say Create Image. And if you're doing this, you should know that this will probably reboot the instance that you're running. So if you're serving traffic on a web server and you do this, it'll take it offline while that happens. So it's a best practice probably is to do this on an instance that's not really actively being used. You set up the instance, get it just the way you want, capture an image, and then you launch new instances from that image. So once that's there, we can say Create Image. All right, so that's in progress right now. And when that's done, that'll show up over here in this AMI section. So we can see the AMI. So we can see this one's already pending and being created. Once that's done, that'll be available for us to launch new instances from. AMIs are a good way to sort of build like a reproducible computer that you can use over and over again, but it's also just a good idea to back up an instance that you're customizing regularly with an AMI. All right, cool. Let's switch back to the slides and talk about some other storage options on top of AWS. Okay. So we'll talk about Amazon S3. So S3 stands for the Simple Storage Service. There's 3 S's in there. S3 allows you to is an object store, and with S3 you can store really any amount of data. So it stores objects in what's called buckets. An object can be as small as 1 byte and as large as 5 terabytes, and you can have an unlimited amount of objects in a bucket. So it's really suitable for almost any amount of storage. It's very scalable and durable. So things that you store within that will be available and accessible, by everyone or by who you deem. With S3, encryption is available. You can encrypt objects inside of S3 using a couple different options. When you store an object in S3, they exist in the region that you choose. AWS won't move it from region to region. So this is really important if you're doing something for regulatory or compliance reasons and you need data to remain in the European Union, for example. You can pick a region there. You can set object level permissions. So if you want to control the access to an object, to allow certain users or certain systems to access an object, you can do that. And S3 is easily accessible. We'll go over how to make it available over the web. There's also lots of third-party software that integrates directly with S3. So things like your backup software that you're already using, it might support S3. So it's worth taking a look into. Okay, let's go over to the demo here, and we can go over real quick, creating and storing some objects in S3. So to do that, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We'll leave the EC2 console, and we're going to go to S3. So in this big, long list, I like to narrow this list of services by selecting the category. We'll click Storage and Content Delivery, and then we'll click over to S3. So inside of S3, the top level here, we can see some buckets. So a bucket is like a place where we organize objects inside of. We can click Create Bucket here to make a new bucket. And let's pick a name. We'll pick Demo, and we'll make it in the Oregon region. Let's see what happens. Oh, okay. So S3 kicked back an error that said that I can't create that because someone else is already using the namespace, the bucket name demo. So buckets need to be uniquely named because all customers share that namespace. So you need to pick something that's kind of unique. So we'll just throw some random stuff in there just for today. Probably if I was really doing this, I would pick something I could remember a little bit easier than that. But we'll say create. Okay, so that was random enough to get us a bucket. So now we have this bucket, which is like a top level, part of S3. And we can click inside of the bucket, through this console, and we can see that it's empty. So there's nothing in here right now. So to be able to do something here, let's upload a file. So I've got, I'll click upload, and then up here on my desktop, I've got this picture that I took a couple years ago that I'm a pretty big fan of. And I want to make sure it's safe and available, so I'll put it inside S3. I'll select that and say upload. And let me just get this out of the way so we can see. You can stage a bunch of files in here and then click start upload, and they will be uploaded. Okay, cool. So now we have this this image, this object in S3. This is 123.7 kilobytes. And we can select that and get some properties to take a look at that. So the image has a link to it, but if I try to load this link in my browser, it should say that I don't have access to it because it hasn't been made publicly available. So by default, objects that you put in S3 will be private. This makes it really good for things like backups or sensitive data. But sometimes, S3 is a really useful place to serve, content or data. So if you're backing up a bunch of photos that you want to share with your family, or you've got, resources that are loaded into your website, like CSS files or JavaScript files or images, you can put them in S3 and serve them right from there. So to do that, we can click over to permissions, and one way to do this is to click over to permissions, and you can add really fine-grained permissions about what kinds of things can access, that object. But a real easy way, if I just wanted to make this public so that I could share with the world, would be to right-click in here and then click Make Public. And this will say, hey, are you sure you want to make this object public? And I'll say yes, because it's great. Let me click back over to Properties here, and now this link here that had a lock on it before because the object was private is now unlocked. And if we click that, it'll load this image, and then you get to see this wonderful picture of where I used to live. So that's how you can store and serve objects in S3. You don't have to make things public, but it's pretty useful. Some people are storing entire static websites in S3 and serving it from there. It makes for like a sort of really low cost, way and simple way to serve a website. All right, great. So let's go back to the slides to talk about sort of the last couple of things here in the webinar. Okay. So, this is something that's really important to people, which is billing and cost management. So with billing, if you do the things we did today, you'll be under the free tier. But, there's a lot of anxiety that people sometimes have about this, like, am I going over my, limit? How do I know how much I'm spending on AWS? Things like that. There's a bunch of features to help you do that, and I want to make sure we get through these before the end of the webinar here. So let's cut back over to the demo, and I'll show you just how to set up a billing alarm. Okay, so let's click back over to our console. So in the section of that, if you click on your name up here, this is the username that you logged in as, you can click on billing and cost management. And this takes you to a part of the console that has a lot of information about what you're spending, what your AWS spend is, what your estimated spend is, things like that. This is a good place to customize and use, or to take a look at to understand some visibility into what's going on. One of the things that you can do here is configure billing alerts. So let's make a simple billing alert that say if we go over $5 a month, send me an email so that I can do something about it. So to do that, you want to go over to Preferences. And you can check, and if you haven't done this already, you'll need to check this box that says you want to receive billing alerts. And then once you have that set, you can click on Manage Billing Alerts. And from here, we'll build a simple alert. So this is taking us to another service called CloudWatch. And we can, to do that, what we're going to do is make a CloudWatch alarm that'll send us a notification. Click over on Alarms, say Create Alarm. This gives us a couple of different options of what we can make an alarm on. You could use CloudWatch to make alarms for other things, but we'll just do billing right now. So we'll make an alarm for the total estimated charges. And we can just select this. It's a little bit hard with the screen being like this. And so there's a metric in your CloudWatch console that shows your estimated charges. You know, like, and we'll make an alarm that says we're over budget if the estimated charges are greater than $5. So we'll set that. We'll set this alarm up. So when this metric goes over $5 a month, it'll set off the alarm, and we can use that to make a notification. And we'll have it email me. So I'll make this alarm configured like this. So we'll send a notification to the budgets list, and we can put a whole bunch of emails in here if we wanted to, but we'll just put mine in there for now. And we click Create Alarm. Okay. So now it's going to send me an email to confirm that I'm good to go with that billing alarm. This is something that's really great to do. I would do this right away, in your accounts, just so that you understand, if something goes wrong and you go over the free tier, you can get alerted to it and then figure out how to fix that. All right, let's just sort of wrap this up by cutting back the slides and go over what we covered. Okay. So today, in this webinar, we went over, how we can create an AWS account, how the first steps we need to do in that account, creating IAM users and enabling multi-factor authentication. Then I went over how the things you need to do to launch and connect to EC2 instances. So that's creating key pairs and security groups. I also went over how we can back up and restore EC2 instances with snapshots and AMIs. Then we took a look at S3 for storing and serving files. It's a great place to store your backups or static web sites or sort of any kind of thing that you want to store there. And finally, we took a look at the billing console so we could see how we could set billing alerts, in there. So thanks for joining the webinar today. I know that with some of those technical difficulties, we're a little bit out of time, so I'm not sure that we have too much time for any Q&A right now. But right now, what you can see here is a bunch of poll questions, about the webinar. I really encourage you to fill those out. We use that feedback to help make the webinars in this platform better. So let us know what you think, and get that stuff filled out. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Dave, for a great webinar. And I'd like to thank, again, our moderators for answering the audience's questions. If you have any comments on our previous and upcoming webinars or suggestions on the topics you wish AWS can cover in future webinars, please drop us a line at aws-webcasts@amazon.com. Again, that's aws-webcasts@amazon.com. Unfortunately, we have another webinar about to start right after this, so we're going to have to close this room out. Please just fill out those 3 polls on the left-hand side if you have a quick chance. And again, we apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning, and we thank you for your patience as we got Dave up and running. Thanks a lot, and have a great rest of your day.